Buongiorno everybody. Sono molto onorato e orgoglioso di ricevere questo premio in occasione della Giornata Internazionale della Donna. Un ringraziamento speciale ad Aisppd e tutte le persone coinvolte con Aisppd. Grazie mille. I apologize for my very poor Italian, but I hope you understood a little bit of what I was saying and appreciate my sentiment. My name is Professor Paul Sharpe from King's College London, and it is a great pleasure and honor for me to be speaking to you via this video to accept the 2023 Aisppd medal. I'd just like to tell you a little bit about some of the science in relation to what my lab have been doing over the last few years. Many of you may be familiar with the general concept of regenerative medicine, using stem cells that are isolated from an individual's tissues and organs that are grown in the lab and then in some way engineered to try and grow new tissues, organoids, or indeed whole organs that can then be transplanted back into the individual. Now, in my case, we have been working on this kind of problem specifically in relation to teeth. And if you think about it, tooth replacement today, I'm sure you're all aware, the state of the art is a dental implant. Here you have a missing organ, a tooth, that is replaced by a piece of metal. That metal is screwed into the bone of the jaw, and then that acts as an artificial root, and then that is capped with a ceramic or plastic tip to resemble a tooth. Now, this kind of technology has been around for a very long time. This is a 2,000-year-old skull that was excavated in London that had a dental implant. And in this case, a piece of metal, as you can see here, had been hammered into the extraction socket where the tooth had fallen out to replace that lost tooth. So the way we replace teeth today is essentially the same as the way teeth were replaced 2,000 years or more. And that is to replace a living organ, the tooth, with a piece of metal. Now, dental implants work well today. The problem with them is really twofold. One is that they, like all metal implants in the body, hip replacements, etc., over time they can fail. And the main way that metal implants fail in the mouth is that the bone around the screwed thread starts to resorb, starts to disappear, and then the implant falls out. And that is a problem with dental implants because dental implants do not restore or regenerate lost bone. So if you have situations where there is very little bone in the first place, then dental implants are not really a very good solution. And one of the worst diseases where this appears is shown here. So this is the x-ray of a mouth of an elderly lady who has been suffering from postmenopausal osteoporosis. Now, postmenopausal osteoporosis is where, as a result of the menopause, the bone starts to disappear from the body progressively. And when that happens in the mouth, very quickly, the consequence is that the teeth become loose and can very quickly fall out. And as a result of that, these poor individuals can lose all their teeth very rapidly. So there's a huge quality of life issue here. And the only treatment, real treatment, is as shown on this radiograph, is for pieces of the ribs, the bone in the ribs, to be removed and grafted into the mouth, and that's what these little screws here show. Here on the lower jaw, here on the upper jaw. These are screws that are holding those bone grafts in. And that has produced just enough bone for two very, very small dental implants to be put in this case in the lower jaw, to try and hold a prosthesis of some kind to allow this individual to have some kind of tooth-like structures, false tooth-like structures in the mouth. So this is a big problem. What we have been working on is a tooth replacement that is based not on metal implant, but are based on a cell implant. So the concept is that we isolate and expand the cells that are required to make a tooth, and then put these together in a system to produce what we call a tooth primordium. This is how a tooth would look like when it first starts forming in the embryo. And then we can transplant those into the mouth and get them to grow a tooth. Now, in this system, the same cells that will make a tooth also make the bone. So in addition to a tooth, we get the formation of new bone around that tooth. So this is very different from what you would get from any kind of current implant. This is what these little structures look like. You can see here, for example, on this bottom left panel, you can see obvious structure. That is a developing tooth. And indeed, in these masses that you see, there are usually 4 or 5 developing teeth. And when we cut through them, section them and have a look through, these can be clearly identified as developing teeth. What we do is we physically separate these into individual developing teeth and then transplant them into the mouth. And we've done that in animal models. Now, obviously the mouth is a rather alien environment to do transplanting cells, but remarkably, at least in animal models, these early developing teeth that we've made from cells grown in the lab survive and give rise to teeth. These teeth grow normally, they erupt into the jaw, and they develop not only new bone, but also the connective tissue that attaches the tooth to the bone. This shows the upper jaw of the mouth of a mouse, and this white body here is the forming transplanted biotooth, a tooth that is grown from a transplant of cells. And again, when we cut through that and have a look, you can see an erupting tooth here. Looks completely normal. It's got the attachment connective tissue, this tissue that's called the periodontal ligament, and it's developed its own new bone, as shown here, this material that surrounds, red material that surrounds the whole tooth. So what this system gives you is the opportunity, particularly, for example, in cases like postmenopausal osteoporosis, to provide a transplant that creates new bone. And as that bone is created, a new tooth develops from that bone. Now, we can do this in animal models using animal cells. What we can't yet do is apply this to humans, because the cells that we use in animals, we cannot get or even indeed use in a human. So the challenge we have now, and we're working on this, and indeed many others around the world are, is to be able to identify and grow cells that you could take from an adult human that would be able to be recombined in the same kind of way that we do this with the animal cells and grow a tooth. There isn't any reason why that can't be possible. Certainly if we can get the right cells, this will happen. But it's going to take quite some more considerable time. In the meantime, we've been looking at trying to solve another problem in dentistry, and that is dental caries, treatment of tooth decay. It's still a huge problem, as these figures show. The number of 200 million dental filling procedures at a huge cost. Basically, when you get dental caries, tooth decay, You visit the dentist, and the dentist takes out his drill and removes all that decaying and dead material. And that leaves a big hole in the tooth, particularly in the dentine tissue. That hole is filled and has to be filled with something such as calcium hydroxide or other more improved versions of calcium hydroxide. These are essentially cements. So you are removing what was live material from the tissue and replacing it with an inorganic cement, just to fill the hole in. Now, this is a live material, and you can see that here from these pictures that show exposure following tooth decay, where you can see that the underlying cellular pulp material is red. It's got a blood supply. It is alive. And what you are doing is replacing on top of that the mineralized material, the dentine, with a cement that really does not support the proper structure of the tooth, or indeed the organic material below. So what we have been developing is a completely different way of repairing and treating dental caries, where we don't use any cement. What we use is a small drug that we've developed, very easily synthesizable drug, that we deliver into the cavity, into the hole made by the dentist, on a biodegradable material. This is a sponge-like material. This is soaked in the drug. And what the drug does is stimulate the resident stem cells within the tooth to make the specialized cells called odontoblasts that give rise to new dentine. That dentine then forms as the delivery material, the biodegradable sponge, starts to biodegrade. So the sponge biodegrades and is replaced with dentine, the natural tooth material. So in essence, we are stimulating the tooth to repair itself. And this works amazingly well. We have used rodent models, mice and rats, because you can make bigger holes in rats. And these holes that we make artificially by drilling through the dentine, you just look at the rat model here where this little asterisk points out the material. This was once a hole. That hole has been filled completely naturally by the tooth's own stem cells, giving rise to cells that make new dentine. And that dentine is minerally identical to the normal dentine. So there are no cements, there are no adhesives. The tooth repairs itself, and it repairs itself with a completely natural structure. So the advantages of this procedure, which we call redent for regenerating dentine, is it stimulates natural tooth repair. Tooth repair themselves by regenerating the bulk of the key mineralized material that make up the structure of the tooth, the dentine. That dentine is completely normal. There are no cements, there are no adhesives. And as a consequence of the tooth repairing itself with a natural material, the tooth is considerably stronger. This is the first biological filling product, and the importance is that the drug that we use is delivered at an incredibly small dose called a microdose. So we are in the process now, we've done all the preclinical experiments. We're in the process now of going out and raising the funds to take this into the clinic to do the clinical trials. So I've just given you hopefully a very short flavour of some of the things that are in current research projects in my lab that are directed directly towards clinical dentistry, trying to harness modern ways of stimulating tooth repair, of stimulating entire new teeth to develop, along with bone and connective tissue. Once again, I'd like to end by giving my enormous thanks to everybody in the organisation for the award of this medal, for which I am very grateful and extremely proud. And I've had the great pleasure over my career of having some wonderful people in my lab, and the majority of those have been women, all of whom have done such amazing work that I wouldn't be able to speak to you today about any of this research if it wasn't for their efforts. for which I'll be eternally grateful. So thank you very much. Buongiorno, grazie mille, and I hope you've enjoyed my presentation.